Good morning. This video is for my US history students. I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to watch this video. This video is your only assignment for the day, so please take some time to look over it. I might even encourage you to rewatch it when we come back from break, just as a refresher. So why do I want to spend some time and make a video on Andrew Jackson? Well, there's a lot to unpack about this man. And you guys actually have an Andrew Jackson Near Pod tomorrow. And then when we come back from break, we're going to decide whether or not you guys believe that he was more of a national hero or a villain. And then we're going to dive into more causes that will eventually bring us into the Civil War era. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the Age of Jackson folder and click on the PowerPoint. I just wanted to take some time to go over the material with you. So I'm going to download this, and then I'm pretty sure I have to share screen. Hold on one second. Let's see. Hopefully you guys can see this. Download. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. Figuring it out. Okay. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time going over Andrew Jackson with you. And so there's a couple of different important pieces to know about Andrew Jackson. One of them being that he and colleagues will create a new political party during the election of 1828. So we don't have our typical Republicans and Democrats that we think of today. These traditional older political parties were a little bit different. So originally they were called the Whigs or the National Republicans, and then the Jacksonian Democrats because Jackson is credited for creating this political party. Okay. So originally the Whigs or the National Republics were our Federalists. Remember, the Federalists were the ones that wanted a strong central federal government, right? And so they believed that the federal government has a role in taking care of everybody, that large federal government is responsible for that. They also believed that there are things that our national government needs to do to take care of its people, whether that be, build new roads, provide services, improve towns, whatever that might be. This group also believed in a national bank. So instead of having states run their own banking system with their own currencies, right? Now that we've got our Constitution in place, they want to centralize or create some unity within our currency. Okay. And then they also were very opposed to Jackson because Jackson creates his own belief system and party. So these are the early anti-federalists. Remember, the anti-federalists didn't want too large of a federal government. They wanted the states to have power. Okay, but now they're called the Jacksonian Democrats. So they believe that the government didn't need to have a lot of interference or interaction with the states, right? And that individual states were responsible for taking care of their people and improving the lives of those people. They did not believe in a national bank. They didn't want that regulation. They wanted the states to have that power. And then a lot of people, in terms of like groups that supported the anti-federalists, were typically the Southerners, slaveholders, smaller farmers, and the working class. And so the Whigs, if you think of like fancy wigs that our founding fathers wore, those were more of like the higher up, wealthier men of the era, or they were the ones that kind of supported the larger businesses, if that helps you remember. Okay. So 1828, Andrew Jackson does win the presidency. Remember, he is a major figure from the War of 1812. He successfully led a battle against the British in the Battle of New Orleans. What makes him a little bit different is he's not from wealth like a lot of our earlier presidents. He's from west of the Appalachian Mountains, and a lot of the commoners, farmers, and white Southerners supported him. And if you remember from our crash course that he was called Old Hickory because he was tough as wood, right? So a couple of different avenues that Andrew Jackson felt was really important was looking into issues within the government itself and looking at corruption. So he introduced what's called the spoil system. And this was kind of a belief that political positions could be given to friends and supporters, and that loyalty was really important to him. He didn't want people to kind of backlash with him, and that, you know, he believed that the people that he worked with should be trusted. Okay. And so this concept is called the kitchen cabinet. And he appointed people, or he picked people out for the executive branch positions. These were very close friends. They circled together and they advised him. They didn't really do too much in terms of like actual partake in the government, but they were more of an advisory role. Okay. Then we have what's called the Tariff of 1828. And so Northerners favored a tariff, if you know what a tariff is. Okay, these are taxes that are put on goods. They favored a new tariff act because they were afraid of competition from foreigners or other countries like Great Britain and France. So they wanted a tariff to be given to allow for more business to thrive in the United States. So France and Great Britain saw that, you know, ooh, it's kind of expensive to trade with the United States. They'll stop trading with us, and that will bring in more money to the United States and those businesses. So they hoped that Americans would buy more domestically rather than buying overseas. The South feared that Europe would retaliate or, you know, rebel, and they would put tariffs on their own goods. So that was kind of a disagreement about this act. Okay. And the issue really centers around the idea of taxing cotton. If you know anything about the original 13 colonies, the southern colonies primarily used cotton as their cash crop, right? And that brought in a large economic profit for the South. Okay, and that'll encourage slavery as well. That's another big topic that we're going to talk about once we get back from break. Okay. So 1828, I know that John Green talked about this in his crash course, but South Carolina threatens to formally withdraw from the United States. This is called to secede. Okay. They threatened that they would do this if tariffs were not lowered. Why would they do that? Again, South Carolina being considered a southern state, they didn't want those tariffs to harm their economic profit of cotton, right? So Andrew Jackson, as a means to respond to South Carolina threatening to secede, sends federal troops to South Carolina, okay? He also has an act passed called the Force Bill. It literally forced South Carolina to pay on the tariff. So South Carolina's like, we're not paying this tax. Andrew Jackson came and said, I'm going to force you to do that. I have a federal army that will do that. And that he believed that the army could be used to collect these tariffs. Okay. South Carolina said that they could nullify, which basically means to excuse or avoid any law that they did not like. Obviously, this would be one of them, the Force Bill. Okay. We're going to work more with this as a topic when we get back from break as well. I know that in the crash course video, they talked about this. In your Nearpod that you're doing tomorrow, they also talk about this. Another major act that's passed by Andrew Jackson is called the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We've already talked about how Native Americans had, for a while, a very difficult relationship with early Europeans that were colonizing, and now they're having issues with early Americans, right? And so that story is carrying out even through the 1800s. I would love for you guys to have an opportunity to, and we're going to be doing this, reading and listening to some of the stories of these Native Americans during the Indian Removal Act. I think oftentimes we just say, oh, and Americans force moved them, the end, right? Well, I would love to dive in to see what exactly they felt, what they saw, what they experienced, okay? So this act, approved by Andrew Jackson, removes about 100,000 Native Americans from eastern lands and resettles them into the new land that was purchased. Remember 1803, our Louisiana purchase, Lewis, Clark, Sacagawea take that journey. And now we have an abundance of land, but they are relocating Native Americans, okay? They are taking them from their land, from their homes, from their familiar places and faces, okay? One of the tribes that's greatly impacted by this Indian Removal Act is called the Cherokee tribe. And they attempt to sue the US government for this act. Okay. The Supreme Court Justice Marshall at the time said that there's no legal standing because Native Americans are not considered citizens. And this case was called Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. Remember at this time that citizens are only white, male, land-owning citizens, okay? They do fight for an appeal at a Supreme Court case called Worcester versus Georgia, and this decision was that the U.S. government could not move the natives. However, Jackson refused to accept this decision, so he basically oversteps. Okay, this forced removal is called the Trail of Tears, and like I said, we're going to read about some of those stories, but Jackson moved the Cherokee tribes out on a trail of tears where one of four, approximately 4,000 people will die on this very long journey in 1838. But as you can see, there are several different Native American groups that are impacted by this forced removal, okay? And so we don't have these states yet, but if you can figure out the linings or the borders of these states, here's Texas, here's a majority of Oklahoma, okay? But we'll come back to that, okay? And then to make matters worse, Andrew Jackson tries to bill the cost of relocation. So Andrew Jackson's like, you know, it costs money to relocate you, so now you have to pay us for that, which is insane. Andrew Jackson vetoed a Bank of the United States. So we're still in an attempt to create a national bank to look over the currencies of our nation, and Andrew Jackson doesn't want anything to do with it. Why? Remember, he doesn't want a strong central government. Okay, even though all of these acts have happened, he is still reelected in 1832. So this will be his second term. He was so popular and so powerful that some people in history nicknamed him King Andrew the First. Okay, obviously he's not a king, but that's how much executive power he was exercising. Okay, so without control or order over a national bank, local banks, state banks spent money recklessly, okay? And so we'll see that when Andrew Jackson leaves presidency, a new president, Martin Van Buren, takes over and encounters an economic depression because there's not a national government that's regulating this money. This will be called the Economic Panic of 1837. Okay, we're almost done. You guys are doing great. Federal funds are now deposited into state banks. There's fear over the value of our banks, right? If there's no regulation, what's the value of South Carolina's currency versus Ohio's currency, right? So Jackson issues this idea called specie circular, which required the purchase of federal land to be hard coin, silver, or gold. This causes the value of our paper money to plummet. So if you know anything about inflation, the value of money can change, right? And when you create new currencies, that value plummets. Okay, so now we have a national debt. Now our nation owes money, okay? Um, because states are spending money and nobody's regulating them and nobody's expecting them to pay the federal government, right? And the federal government's spending money on their troops and, trying to regulate um, different things like the Indian Removal Act. So President Jackson led the nation to pay off the entire national debt by 1835. State banks began speculating on the land boom, so they were guessing that they would make money when they move out west. Jackson began settling Western land in order to retire the national debt. So they're like, go out, move out west. Okay, we're going to see the great Western settlement, manifest destiny, if you've ever heard of that. We'll talk more about that as well. But he is in hopes that if people go and they move and find new opportunities, that national debt will be taken care of. It does not solve that problem. Okay. In 1840, the Whigs, or our National Republicans, got a new war hero from the War of 1812, William Henry Harrison, say that 5 times fast, to be elected. But during his inauguration, he caught pneumonia, and a month after taking office, he died. Harrison did win with a common phrase from the War of 1812 called Tippecanoe, which is the battle that he fought in, and Tyler too. So Harrison had won this battle and killed Tecumseh, which you guys learned about Tecumseh in the War of 1812. He was considered like a national hero to the Native Americans. I grew up in Ohio, and he is very famously known because of his work in that area. So he really wanted to preserve the the Native American culture, for his tribes and for the entirety of Native Americans, but he is killed in battle. So interestingly enough, William Henry Harrison becomes a hero for that. And then here's just a list of all the presidents that have died in office so far, if you want to look at that. Okay. Then we had the Vice President, John Tyler. Obviously, with William Henry Harrison dying, he will take office and is hoping that these two parties can work together, but they're not able to accomplish much. And that kind of leads us into, again, more conflicts that we'll see leading us up to the Civil War. I know that's a lot of material. I know it can be kind of confusing. So if you have any questions, please just let me know.